Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadows of a palace where steam rises from cauldrons, whispers bounce off stone walls, and the stakes of a simple sip could mean life or death. The kitchens of the Topkapi Palace aren't quiet at night, never have been. Fires flicker low, keeping embers warm for the morning feast. Somewhere a ladle clatters, and a cook hisses through his teeth as hot broth splashes onto a bare wrist. But tonight, your attention isn't on the lamb stew or rose-scented rice. It's on a tiny brass tray, trembling slightly in your hand. On it, a demi-tasse cup without a handle black liquid, sloshing gently with every nervous heartbeat. It's coffee, but not just any coffee. This brew is destined for the Sultan himself. And you, poor soul, are the chief coffee taster. You probably won't survive this. Because if someone poisoned the grounds, the next few minutes will turn you into a cautionary tale whispered across kitchens for centuries. But hey, no pressure. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far our sleepy stories reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You raise the cup to your lips. The warmth seeps into your fingers. The scent is dark and earthy, with a swirl of cardamom. This isn't just a drink. It's diplomacy. It's danger. And it's your entire career. The year is sometime in the mid-1500s, and you've worked your way through the palace hierarchy, not with a sword, not with coins, but with taste. There's no job title quite like yours, Kaveh Chibashu, the royal coffee steward, though everyone just calls you the taster. The position requires exquisite palate control, iron nerves, and a death wish signed in scalding hot caffeine. It didn't start this way. Coffee, after all, was once just a bitter little seed chewed by shepherds in Ethiopia. But tonight it's reached the golden center of one of the world's most powerful empires, and it's perched on your tray like a ticking bomb in a porcelain cup. You pause. You breathe in steam. You think, not for the first time, about the guy you replaced. He lasted 3 days. But let's rewind just a little, because you didn't wake up one day and say, "Yes, I shall risk death daily in the name of roasted beans." No, it began long before that. You were once a kitchen boy, peeling garlic until your hands stung, sweating next to ovens the size of bathtubs. You learned how to slice onions without crying, how to guess the freshness of a fish with your nose, and how not to spill the stew when a eunuch walks by. Then one night, the head cook called you over. The old taster had, well, tasted something he shouldn't have. There was an opening. And you, with your too curious tongue and fearless nose, volunteered. Historians still argue whether the palace tasters were actual poison detectors or just symbolic scapegoats. But you've always known the truth. You learned the hard way after that one time with the arsenic-laced pomegranate seeds. Spent a week hallucinating that the Sultan's beard could sing opera. It's not all danger, though. You get perks, satin robes, first pick of pastries, a room that doesn't smell like boiled goat, and then wonk. See, there's the gossip. Oh, the gossip. You hear it all. Who's sleeping where? Who slipped what into whose sherbet? Why the Grand Vizier insists on lemon slices with his coffee, which everyone agrees is a cry for help. And then there's the coffee itself. This cup in your hand isn't just boiled beans. It's a work of art. You supervised its preparation from start to finish, the grinding, the boiling, the foam, the silence. No one speaks during a proper brew. You once slapped an apprentice for humming. The beans came from Yemen, smuggled up through Red Sea ports by merchants with questionable morals and excellent taste. The roasting, done in silence by an old man who's roasted the same way since Suleiman's grandfather sat on the throne. But the brewing, that's your domain. A little brass sesve pot, a tiny coal flame, and timing that could shame a metronome. If you miss the moment the foam bubbles, you start over. You always start over. Tonight's blend is spiced with a hint of clove mint to calm the Sultan's nerves, or perhaps to lull him into trusting the Grand Vizier, which is basically the same thing. Your hand trembles slightly as you bring the cup closer. Not from fear, well, not entirely, but from the sheer weight of ritual. Because in this palace, coffee is everything. It's how treaties are toasted, marriages proposed, betrayals whispered. You once saw a pasha slapped because he dared bring tea instead. And every cup begins with you. You finally sip. It's hot, very hot. Your tongue protests. But then the flavor hits rich, deep, almost smoky, with the faintest sweetness at the edge. The bitterness lingers, but doesn't bite. A perfect brew. You hold the cup up, nod. A servant races to whisk it away to the Sultan. Another night, another narrow escape. You wipe your mouth with the corner of your sleeve. Someone claps you on the back and offers you a candied fig. You survived. This time. But tomorrow the beans come from a new shipment. And the Grand Vizier's smile seemed just a little too pleased. You lean against a marble pillar, still tasting the memory of that last sip, and your thoughts drift back way back. Long before you ever stepped foot in the Topkapi Palace, before coffee arrived in Istanbul, it was just a rumor, a whisper on the wind blowing up from the African highlands. They say it began in the hills of Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. You picture it now, the air dry and golden, the wind rolling over craggy cliffs and rocky soil where goats nibble on everything they shouldn't, including a curious little red berry. That berry, that magical bitter fruit, turned those goats into caffeinated maniacs, skipping, dancing, bleating until even the shepherds got suspicious. And then comes your favorite part of the legend, because no great invention arrives without an animal acting weird first. Enter Caldi, a goat herd so famously over-caffeinated by proxy that he became a sort of mythical mascot. According to the tale, Caldi noticed his goats were behaving like toddlers after a birthday party. When he tried the berries himself, he reportedly danced along with them under the moonlight. A passing monk, irritated by the noise, grabbed some berries and took them back to the monastery. Instead of getting furious, though, he got creative. The monks boiled the berries, drank the resulting brew, and realized, wonder of wonders, they could stay awake through their endless midnight prayers. Divine intervention by way of jitter juice. Historians still argue whether Caldi was a real person or just a convenient mascot for the world's first energy drink. But the story stuck, and so did the brew. Now imagine you're one of those monks. You live in a cold, stone-walled cell. Your job, pray. Your entertainment, also pray. And your bedtime? Optional now that you've got bean juice. Coffee kawa, as the Arabs later called it, spread like wildfire through the Arabian Peninsula. Within a few generations, it was being traded across Yemen, down into Mecca and Medina, and eventually northward toward the Levant. Yemen in particular became the cradle of commercial coffee. The port city of Mokkayas, that Mocha served as the launchpad for beans that would change the world. Back in Istanbul, you remember the first time you saw a sack of mocha beans. Smelled like scorched almonds and earth. The merchant offered you a handful with a wink and said, "This bag caused 3 arrests in Cairo. Worth every coin." But it wasn't always so romantic. You shift uncomfortably on the cushion now as you recall the odd relationship early Islam had with coffee. For a while, religious scholars were split. Coffee stimulated the mind, helped with worship, kept you awake for the Quran. That's a good thing, right? But others saw danger. Coffee houses popped up in Mecca, in Cairo, places filled with music, poetry, political chatter, and scandalous chess games. Clerics complained that too much caffeine made people opinionated, loud, argumentative. Basically, Twitter with more spices. So came the bans. In 1511, the governor of Mecca outlawed coffee. Said it led to sedition, rebellious thinking, disrespect, the usual. Of course, the ban lasted only until the Sultan, your Sultan's grandfather, overruled it. Because even rulers know better than to anger a public that's just been denied its morning cup. Still, the paranoia didn't go away. You remember reading a report, a shipment of beans confiscated in Damascus because they were unholy stimulants. Apparently, someone tried to hide them in jars labeled olive oil. Bold move. The irony, the very thing that made coffee so suspect is what made it irresistible. It opened minds, sharpened tongues, brought people together across lines of class and religion. You've heard tales of Sufi mystics sipping coffee before their chanting rituals, whirling under moonlight, fueled by sacred steam. And yes, that means you technically share a habit with spinning, singing monks. Try not to think about that next time you're testing for poison. Your eyes flick to the edge of the room where a young kitchen boy is watching you, wide-eyed, holding a grinder too big for his hands. You were him once. You wave him over. Pour a few beans into his palm. Let him inhale. Smell that? You ask. That's history and hallucination. Respect both. He nods solemnly. Probably has no idea what you mean. That's fine. Neither do most of the viziers. Because the real magic of coffee isn't just staying awake. It's that strange alchemy of heat, water, and time. A bitter sip that wakes your mind, sharpens your thoughts, and yes, if you're not careful, invites rebellion. You've tasted brews made with cardamom, saffron, and once infamously with crushed pearls. That one was for a visiting Persian prince. He later married a dancer and declared himself allergic to pants. Coffee does things to people. And yet, despite bans, bribes, and brewing disasters, it survived. It spread. It became not just a drink, but a symbol of defiance, of elegance, of civilization itself. You swirl the next cup gently. The foam forms a perfect crescent, a good omen. Out in the city, men argue over chessboards and quote poetry between sips. In the port, smugglers tuck beans into hollowed-out dates. And in the mosque, a cleric quietly drinks from a cup he pretends not to see. All roads lead to the palace. All cups pass through you. And every time you sip, you carry a little piece of Abyssinia in your mouth. Some nights when the fires die down and the palace finally quiets, you stare into the black swirl at the bottom of your cup and think about all the drama this little bean has caused. Not just feasts and flattery, but fury. You remember the first time you heard the phrase bean bans. You were barely a junior apprentice, peeling onions in the far end of the Topkapi kitchen. A senior cook whispered the tale between carrot chops, as though saying the word coffee too loudly might summon the Grand Mufti. Because, believe it or not, there was a time when just owning coffee could get you a beating or worse. As it made its way through the Islamic world in the 1500s, coffee didn't exactly receive a red carpet. Cairo, Mecca, Damascus all saw waves of resistance. And it wasn't just stuffy scholars clutching scrolls. No, entire political factions opposed coffee. Why? Because of what it did. It woke people up. Not just physically, though, yes, it made the foray. Imam, call to prayer a little less painful, but mentally, emotionally, it made people alert, critical, talkative, and that was dangerous. Coffee houses were where revolutions started. You know this because you've been to a few incognito, of course. The kahvekhane, as they were called, were never quiet. Even in the corners, someone was always debating taxes or reciting forbidden poetry. You once watched a poet win a round of applause with a verse about the Sultan's eyebrows. Risky. Historians still argue whether the early bans were about morality or control. Officially, the logic went something like this: coffee altered the mind, which made it harem forbidden. But unofficially, leaders saw a crowd of caffeinated citizens discussing philosophy and thought, oh no, that looks like democracy. In Mecca, the governor had coffee houses shut down, their owners arrested, and their beans burned. Burned. Imagine the smell: thousands of beans roasted to ash in the street. The scent must have been both delicious and devastating. But here's the twist: the public rioted. Yes, over coffee. They demanded their brews back, fought guards, protested the ban with such fury that the governor feared for his life. Eventually, the Sultan himself intervened. He liked his morning cup too much to let some bureaucrat ruin things. And just like that, coffee became legal again. But the tension didn't vanish. You lean forward now, stirring a fresh pot with the long-handled sesvi. The grounds spin like secrets. Every cup in the palace is political. You've seen ambassadors drink each other under the table with competitive tastings. One even passed out during negotiations, snoring beside his saucer. And then there were the bribes. You remember the Persian envoy who slipped a ruby into a coffee tray. Said it was thanks for making it a little stronger. Subtle, you didn't report it, but you did trade that ruby for a better grinder. What? You're loyal, not stupid. The most absurd scheme, though, involved fake coffee. A junior chef tried to brew a blend using roasted chickpeas and bark. Called it Sultan soil. He's still peeling potatoes in Edirne. You've also heard tales of smugglers caught with coffee beans sewn into the hems of their robes, or tucked inside dried figs. One man was found with beans glued to the underside of his camel. That's commitment. And yes, there's a rumor, unconfirmed but delicious, that a noblewoman once laced her husband's coffee with rose water, saffron, and just a hint of something unmentionable to calm his opinions. He later retired early. Coincidence? You sip now from your own cup, laced only with cardamom and relief. You've come to understand that every wave of repression only made coffee stronger. It's like trying to ban conversation or bread. Once people know it exists, you can't take it away. You can only control the cup. And that's what the palace did. It turned coffee into ritual, ceremony. You still remember the day you were formally appointed Kafijabusha. You knelt before the court. The chief steward handed you a velvet pouch of beans. The Sultan nodded, not a smile, not a frown, just a twitch of the mustache. And in that moment, you became the gatekeeper. You thought the danger would end there. You were wrong, because with great caffeine comes great responsibility. Now your trays must arrive exactly on time. Your foam must be at least 2 fingers high, and heaven help you if the brew is bitter. One time the Sultan spat out a cup and demanded to know if his enemies had learned to cook. It wasn't poison, just a new Ethiopian blend. Too earthy. You nearly lost your mustache that day. But you learned. Coffee is like diplomacy. Too weak and no one listens. Too strong and everyone fights. Just enough bitterness keeps you honest. You blow on the latest brew and tilt the pot gently. The aroma rises, smoky, sweet, a little nutty. You whisper a prayer, not for safety, for balance. Out in the city, another ban is being whispered about. Some cleric in Damascus wants to outlaw coffee after sunset. Says it disturbs the dreams of angels? You chuckle. Maybe it does. But tonight, angels or not, the palace still expects their perfect cup. And you, spoon in hand, will deliver. The first time you set foot in the palace's coffee chambers, it didn't smell like coffee. It smelled like marble, clean linen, old cedar chests, and citrus oil. But now, years later, the walls themselves seem steeped in roast. The stone floors echo with the quiet shuffle of slippers and the soft clink of porcelain. The kahve odası, or coffee room, has become your world. And in that world, Istanbul has changed forever. You remember the whispers? The Sultan drinks it every day now. They say he won't make decisions without it. He has a man whose only job is to taste it first, Imogen. Well, Imagine indeed. The rise of the Ottoman mug, the fincan, a small, handleless ceramic cup, wasn't just a fad. It was a full-blown institution. The kind of thing people built careers around, or lost their lives over. You, for one, built yours. The Ottoman Empire didn't just adopt coffee, it absorbed it, transformed it, wrapped it in gold thread and court etiquette, and turned it into a symbol of refinement and power. By the mid-1500s, under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, coffee had climbed out of the marketplaces and into the palace kitchens. It began, like most things, with one curious pasha and a gift from a Yemeni governor. A small bag of beans, an even smaller pot. A tiny set of instructions scrawled in the margins of a diplomatic letter. The first brews were weak, awkward. The cooks boiled the grounds for too long. A royal physician called it mud tea and politely suggested burning the instructions. But then the eunuchs got involved. See, the palace's black eunuchs controlled the harem, by extension, many of the domestic affairs of court. One of them, a man named Mehmed Aga, developed a fascination with the ritual of coffee, its silence, its steam, its power. He began training servants in precise methods: how to grind, how to boil, how to serve. He even demanded the coffee be carried on a tray above eye level so no one could spit in it. That's the kind of forward thinking that gets you promoted. And somewhere in this evolution, The empire appointed its first Kavachibashu, the chief coffee steward. Your role? Well, eventually your role. At first it was ceremonial. A glorified butler. Someone to oversee service and keep the saucers clean. But that changed quickly, because the closer coffee got to the Sultan's lips, the more important it became, and the more dangerous. Historians still argue whether the early Kafekabasha had actual political sway, or if the position was mostly symbolic. You'd laugh if your tongue wasn't still sore from that overly spiced Yemeni blend last week. Because let's be honest, when you're the last person to touch the Sultan's drink before he does, you hold a terrifying kind of power, or at least a terrifying level of responsibility. The Sultan could have anyone's head for one bitter cup, and the court knew it. You remember once, a vizier tried to slip a note under your saucer, said he wanted to enhance the Sultan's morning blend with a special powder. You burned the note, then made sure the vizier's coffee arrived late for a week, just to remind him who he was dealing with. The palace coffee ritual grew elaborate, almost absurd. You had a team of 40 servants. 8 were assigned solely to bean storage. Just one was responsible for polishing the silver spoons. He once cried for an hour when a handle chipped. Your own chamber was lined with rare jars, glass from Venice, porcelain from China, even a pair of carved ivory pots you're pretty sure were illegal. Every morning started the same. You'd bow to the Sultan's portrait just in case he was watching, then inspect the beans like they were tiny diplomats. One chip, one crack, and they were out. Grinding was sacred. You refused to allow it done by hand unless the moon was full. Why? Because that one time it wasn't, the coffee turned out sour. Superstition? Maybe. But no one argues with a taster who's survived 6 poisoning attempts. You glance at your reflection now in a copper tray. The faint lines under your eyes. The cautious smile. The tongue that can detect a hint of tamarind from across the courtyard. You've tasted blends infused with lavender, musk, even powdered coral. Some were divine. Some made your nose bleed. One nearly got you demoted when the Sultan called it like drinking a sandal. But you persisted, perfected, because this isn't just about caffeine. It's about power. In Ottoman Istanbul, coffee had become a language of influence. Who served it? Who received it? How long the foam lasted? Whether the cup was warm? Whether the lips that tasted it twitched in approval or froze in alarm? You once saw a guest faint when the Sultan nodded at his brew. No one knows if it was joy or fear. You sip now from your latest creation. It tastes like triumph and just a whisper of ginger. The eunuch beside you gives a subtle nod. Time to deliver. You follow the ancient route through the inner palace, past silk-draped chambers and cold-eyed guards. In your hands, the royal tray. On it, 2 cups, one for the Sultan, one for you. You stop just before the curtain. Breathe. This is it. You raise your own cup. Sip first. Pause. Then step forward. The Sultan doesn't look at you. He never does. But he lifts the second cup, drinks slowly, and then without a word places it down. He doesn't smile. He doesn't frown. He blinks once. And that is your reward. You back away. Alive. Again. The harem isn't what outsiders think it is. It's not a nest of half-dressed women lounging around on velvet cushions, fanning themselves while waiting for some dramatic entrance. No, it's quieter. More dangerous. You know this because you've been summoned there. Not just once, but many times, tray in hand, shoulders squared, breath held. And the harem women, they are not waiting. They are watching. The first time you entered, you expected giggles and perfume. What you got was silence and calculation. The chief eunuch ushered you in. He never smiled, never blinked as far as you could tell. Just whispered, walk slowly, never turn your back, and keep your eyes low. You did. You still do. Inside, the scent is jasmine and roasted almonds. Cushions are stacked high. Silk rustles like leaves. But beneath the softness, you can feel the tension. This is where alliances are brewed. Literally. Because the harem isn't just about beauty. It's about strategy. And coffee plays a role more important than many wars. Each morning, the Sultan's favorite is granted the honor of serving him coffee. It's not about caffeine. It's about proximity, influence. A few minutes of conversation, a hint of fragrance on the rim of the cup, and before the Sultan tastes it, guess who does? You. You've sipped more harem coffee than anyone alive. And it's different in here. They use their own blends, more fragrant, more delicate. Clove, cinnamon, a hint of orange peel. But sometimes there's something extra. Historians still argue whether the harem women ever attempted to influence policy through coffee. Whether they bribed or poisoned or seduced via the cup. You don't need a debate. You've tasted it. Once you sipped a blend that numbed your tongue and made your left eye twitch for 3 days. No one admitted to anything. But the Sultan fell asleep halfway through a council meeting. Another time, you caught a whiff of something unfamiliar, floral but wrong. You made a show of spilling the tray. Apologized. Cried. Wailed about your clumsiness. The Sultan just ordered a new cup. You never found out what was in the first one. But you never forgot the look in the consort's eyes. Cold. Grateful. Calculating. Serving coffee in the harem as an art form. You've watched as the women grind beans by hand, whispering as they do. Each blend is a coded message. A dash of cardamom, affection. A swirl of honey, flattery. Too much cinnamon, distrust. One night, a new girl barely 16 asked you which spice was the truth teller. You told her nutmeg. She smiled. She never asked again. Sometimes the women ask you for advice. You pretend to give them neutral tips. More foam means more elegance. Serve while it's hot. Never let the cup rattle. But every so often, you drop a hint, a word, a favor. You're not just a taster. You're a bridge between the harem and the throne. You've heard things in here that would topple dynasties. You've watched alliances form over cups small enough to fit in your palm. And you've learned never to underestimate anyone holding a finken. Because the coffee may be light and lovely, but the woman serving it might have the fate of empires tucked into her sleeve. You once witnessed a spat between two consorts that ended with an entire batch of beans mysteriously replaced with chicory root. The next day, the Sultan complained of a stomach ache. The day after that, someone was reassigned to the laundry chamber. Coincidence, perhaps? But you don't drink harem coffee casually anymore. You sip. You pause. You let your instincts speak. Sometimes you simply refuse. Bow low and say, it needs more foam. That's your code for I don't trust this. The smartest women catch on. The others disappear. You learned early coffee is power in a palace where words are too risky. No one argues with a bad brew. No one questions a man who coughs after a sip. And so you've built your reputation not just on taste but on discretion. You know who's rising, who's falling, who just discovered they're pregnant, who's secretly writing poetry to a guard captain. You know, and you never say a word, because silence is what keeps you alive. That in an iron stomach. Tonight the harem sends for you again. You walk the corridor slowly. The walls glow with candlelight. A servant opens the screen. There she is, the Valida Sultan, the Sultan's mother. No one outranks her. Not really. She gestures to the tray. You sip. Rosewater. Mint. Just a shadow of musk. Safe. She nods. You bow. And just before you leave, she says, tell the Grand Vizier the blend is softer now. He'll understand. You don't respond. But you understand. Later, the Grand Vizier receives his own cup. No one connects the two. But you were there. You carried both. And in that moment, you realize again, the empire doesn't run on swords or scrolls. It runs on coffee. And you're the only one who drinks both sides. You wake in the middle of the night. Your tongue feels strange. Not in pain exactly, just heavy. The taste in your mouth is faintly metallic, like you lick the inside of a coin purse. You sit up. That's never a good sign. You've been tasting coffee long enough to know when something's off. And tonight, something is off. A bell tolls somewhere deep in the palace. Not a loud bell, just a soft chime from the inner corridors. The signal for emergency. Discretion. Poison. You grab your robe and slip out. Because tonight paranoia has returned, and you, chief coffee taster of the Ottoman Empire, are once again the first line of defense between the Sultan and a really, really bad morning. The palace guards are already posted outside the kitchens when you arrive. One of them hands you a sealed cup. "This one didn't smell right," he mutters. "The night steward said it was meant for His Majesty's private reserve." You nod. You've seen this before. A blend no one brewed. A delivery no one claims. A test. Or a trap. You take the cup and retreat to your corner. Your tools are ready: silver spoon, ivory stir, a small bowl of clean water. You stir. Sip. And wait. Nothing happens. At first. But then the taste. Not bitter. Not sweet. Wrong. It's almost perfect. And that's what tells you it isn't. Historians still argue whether poisonings in the Ottoman court were exaggerated by Western travelers who wanted to sell scandalous books. But they weren't the ones drinking mystery brews in the dark. You spit the coffee into a copper bowl. Hold it up to the light. Tiny bubbles cling to the rim. That's unusual. You dip a silver pin into the cup. Wait for tarnish. Nothing. Then you take out the pigeon. Yes, the pigeon. You keep a pair in a cage just behind your chamber's maw. Scrawny birds fed on barley and crumbs. One sip of poison liquid and they twitch. You drip a few drops onto a piece of soaked bread. Place it in the dish. Watch. The bird pecks. Waits. Then it stumbles. Then it flops. Then it stops. You sigh. Of course. Poison. That makes 4 attempts this year. And it's only May. You hand the cup back to the guard. Dispose of this, you say, and tell the steward to start sleeping with one eye open. Back in your chamber, you cleanse your palate with milk and honey. Your tongue still tingles. Sometimes it takes days to fully wear off. You keep records of every incident. In a hidden notebook, bound in goatskin, tucked behind a fake panel in your wardrobe. It's got codes, names, symbol, recipes, and yes, antidotes. You know 42 of them. Some herbal, some mineral. One involving ground sapphire and pomegranate juice. You haven't needed that one yet. But it's only a matter of time. You once visited a poisoner. Discreetly. In the spice market. She called herself Mother Vinegar. She sold you powdered toadstool, scorpion ash, and a small vial labeled Simply Forget Me. You asked her what was in it. She smiled and said, "That depends on who forgets whom." You keep it sealed. Still, just in case. Poison is not the only threat, of course. Sometimes the sabotage is psychological. A rival servant once convinced a brewer to roast the beans twice, said it was the new Venetian method. The result? The Sultan's coffee tasted like burnt bread and regret. You spent a week defending your palate to angry courtiers. Eventually you were cleared. But the brewer? Gone. Reassigned to fish duty. The next time you saw him, he smelled like mackerel and defeat. The Sultan himself isn't naive. He knows people might want to harm him. That's why he demands you drink first. Always. In front of witnesses. You've seen him watch you, eyes sharp over the rim of his cup. He trusts no one. Not even you. Especially not you. But he respects you. That's more useful. And so you've become something more than a taster. You're a poison detector. A kitchen detective. A psychological warrior armed with spoons and instinct. You've learned to recognize the signs. A slightly sour aftertaste that shouldn't be there. The slick sheen on a bean that suggests tampering. The faint smell of almonds, never good. You've smelled it once. Just once. Didn't even sip that cup. Just tossed it into the brazier. The brazier caught fire. Blue flames. You didn't sleep for 3 days. But you were alive. And that's your only real job, isn't it? To stay alive. So the Sultan can too. You lie back now on your narrow cot, heart still racing from the bird incident. You wonder, who tried to do it this time? A jealous concubine? A disgraced official? A cook with a grudge? You make a mental note to review the bean inventory. Double check the storage locks. And maybe, just maybe, feed the other pigeons something nice. You'll need it tomorrow. Because this empire runs on coffee. And sometimes that coffee runs red. The tray is warm beneath your fingers. Not hot, not scalding, just the right temperature. Like it's holding its breath. Like it knows something's about to happen. You're heading to the Sultan's chambers again, but this time it isn't routine. This is a special blend, prepared by your own hand from beans you roasted yourself, because last night's pigeon test left you rattled. And when you're rattled, you go back to your tools. Not just your palate, your instruments. People imagine a chief coffee taster armed only with his tongue and a fabulous sense of smell. And yes, those help. But your real strength? Your toolkit. Your first weapon, the sesvi. That long-handled, narrow-necked copper pot. Yours is older than most courtiers. Slightly dented at the rim, but perfectly seasoned. You've tried newer ones. Chenier, Brassier. But they never quite feel right. This one bubbles at just the right moment. Makes that soft huff of steam like a baby dragon sighing. It doesn't betray you. And then there's the grinder. You have 5. One is wood from Damascus, painted with lazy vines. One is brass, heavy, with a crank that squeaks unless you oil it with rose water. But your favorite, a small Turkish model with an ivory handle and a compartment that sings when it clicks into place. You once caught a steward trying to clean it with vinegar. You chased him out with a spoon. A gold-rimmed spoon. Speaking of spoons, those matter too. Not just for stirring, but for testing the chromatophone that should float like a velvet cloud on the top of each cup. You use silver spoons for neutral blends, gold ones for spicy infusions, and a single obsidian spoon you inherited from the previous kavechabasha, which you suspect is cursed. You've used it 3 times. Each time the day ended in fainting, shouting, or onto a sword duel. It now lives at the back of a velvet-lined drawer. Historians still argue whether such rituals and tools were superstition or precision. You say, why not both? Because when the Sultan's mood depends on a single swallow, there's no such thing as a small detail. Take the fincan, the coffee cup. It's not just porcelain, it's communication. Handleless, fragile, tucked into a filigree zarf, a metal holder designed so you don't burn your fingers or look like a peasant. Each zarf has meaning. Silver means dignity. Gold means celebration. Mother of pearl, that's dangerous. That means someone's trying too hard. You once sent back a mother of pearl zarf. It came from a foreign emissary trying to impress the Sultan. The blend was syrupy, over-scented. You rewrote history with one polite rejection. The Sultan didn't drink it. The emissary left confused. 2 weeks later, his country lowered its grain tariffs. Coincidence? You'll never know. But you remember the zarf. Other items in your toolkit. A tiny sieve for straining rogue grounds. A marble slab for cooling excess foam. A glass rod for measuring thickness, calibrated to the Sultan's exact preference. You keep a pouch of emergency additives, ground ginger, rose dust, cinnamon, and one sealed jar marked only if he's sad. Inside vanilla. The Sultan doesn't know, but you do. You also carry a thin strip of silk that changes color when dipped into suspicious liquids. Your assistant once called it magic cloth. You didn't correct him. And there's a mirror. Not for vanity, for observation. You hold it to the surface of a fresh brew. If the foam breaks too quickly, something's off. If it clings, you breathe easier. Coffee reflects the truth if you know how to ask. You remember one afternoon when a visiting prince from the Safavid court requested a demonstration of Ottoman elegance. You obliged. You laid out your tools like surgical instruments. Ground the beans by hand. Boiled water from the palace cistern. Infused the blend with just a hint of clove and dusted the foam with gold leaf. The prince wept. Actually wept. Said he'd never tasted anything so pure. The Sultan just nodded, as if to say, yes, we do this every day. That prince sent you a ruby afterward. You traded it for more beans. Priorities. But not every day is dramatic. Most days, your toolkit is your comfort. A small army of implements that protect you, guide you, give you control in a world full of political chaos and poison-soaked silk. You run your fingers over each item before every brew, like a priest counting prayer beads. Because coffee isn't just a drink. It's a ceremony, a code, a shield, and you are its high priest. You pause now before entering the Sultan's chamber. Cup in hand, tray perfectly balanced, spoon gleaming. Your fingers check the fincan one last time. Warm, not hot. Foam unbroken. The tools have done their job. Now it's your turn. You step inside. He watches. You sip. You survive. And just before you leave, he says quietly, the first time in months. Nice foam. You allow yourself the smallest smile, because that's praise. In Sultan speak, that's applause. And the tools, silent in your chamber, wait for tomorrow's performance. You slip out of the palace one evening, wrapped in a plain cloak and the kind of anonymity that only a royal servant can perfect. No tray, no entourage, no silver spoon, just you and your worn sandals, heading into the alleys of Istanbul like a ghost in search of smoke. Tonight, you're not the chief coffee taster. You're just a man who needs to breathe air that hasn't been boiled with cardamom and ambition. You take a left past the spice bazaar, another through a covered arch that smells like damp stone and dried lemons, until you reach a door that doesn't look like anything. Which, of course, is the point. You knock once, then twice, then once again. A voice inside grumbles, "Password?" You sigh. "Milk ruins the foam," you mutter. The door creaks open. Inside is not luxury. It's not clean or quiet or even particularly safe. But it is real. A narrow coffee house tucked between two crumbling shops. Its only sign a painting of a lion holding a cup. You sit. A boy brings you a cup before you order. You're a regular here, whether they know your name or not. No one asks questions. And that's why this place matters. Because here outside the palace, coffee doesn't serve the Sultan. It serves the people. Historians still argue whether Ottoman coffee houses were more important as social spaces or as engines of rebellion. You say both. Here in the dim back rooms of Istanbul, the city hums with secrets. Men argue politics over steaming cups. Scholars recite verses between sips. Sailors swap rumors of European wars. And once you swear, a cat walked across a map of Persia and accidentally triggered a debate about foreign policy. You sip slowly. It's not as refined as the palace blends, but it has something your brews rarely to risk. Not of poison, but of truth. Coffee houses like this have been shut down before, raided, condemned by clerics as dens of corruption. A mufti once called them Satan's waiting rooms. He was later spotted sipping quietly behind a curtain at one. Of course, you once saw a pamphlet passed under a table here. A poem mocking the Grand Vizier, printed on the back of a bakery invoice. Bold, dangerous, hilarious. The man who passed it to you, gone the next week. But the poem survived, rememorized by 5 merchants and whispered in the fish market for days. That's the power of coffee houses. They don't just serve coffee, they serve ideas. And ideas are the real poison. You glance around the room. A merchant is playing chess with a bookseller. A student is translating Greek philosophy by candlelight. A woman in a faded shawl is telling fortunes from coffee grounds fall. You've tried it. Once she told you you'd either marry a rich widow or get stabbed over nutmeg. So far, neither. Someone opens the door and a gust of air blows over the coals. The smell of roasting beans thickens. You close your eyes. Here, you're free. Not from your duty, no. That follows you like the scent of cloves in your beard. But from the pressure, from the ceremony, from the silence of power. Here people laugh when coffee's too bitter. Here no one blames the foam. Here a cracked cup doesn't mean exile. You once told a joke here about the Sultan's nose and a pepper grinder. Got a round of applause and a near heart attack when someone said he'd love that joke. You didn't sleep for 2 nighs, but nothing happened. And so you came back. There's something about the way the city breathes at night, especially in these rooms. The empire may march on conquest and coin, but its heart beats in cups like these. Small, hot, shared. The palace may set the tone, but the coffee house sets the rhythm. A man beside you offers you a refill. You accept. It's strong, burnt slightly, no sugar. Perfect. He's a traveler from Aleppo, selling textiles. He asks what you do. You lie. Say you manage spice inventories for the palace. It's not untrue. It's just incomplete. He tells you a story about a caravan master who brewed coffee on a moving camel. You counter with a tale of a drunk pasha who tried to serve coffee in a helmet. You both laugh. Then he leans closer. Do you think the Sultan knows what people say here? You sip, eyes on your cup. If he drinks enough coffee, you murmur, he probably dreams it. He snorts. Then he must never sleep. You don't answer. Later, as you leave, the woman reading fortunes grabs your wrist, presses your empty cup into your palm. Look at the ground, she says softly. You do. The streaks form a strange shape, like a dagger balanced on a scale. Danger, she whispers. But fair danger. You nod, say nothing. Walk back into the night, because tomorrow you return to gold trays and hidden pigeons and velvet-wrapped cups. But tonight you were just a man, drinking with rebels, listening to the city whisper back. The sun has barely risen over the Bosphorus, and already the palace is in a frenzy. You're summoned not to the kitchens, not to the harem, but to the outer courtyard, where a foreign envoy waits with the kind of face that suggests he hasn't slept and desperately needs coffee. A Venetian. You can tell by the boots. Always with the boots, even when it's too warm for boots. He bows too deeply, talks too quickly, and gestures as though he's conducting a storm. His Turkish is passable, his impatience fluent. He presents a gift. Not gold, not silk. Something rarer, a small wooden box containing 3 green coffee beans. Arabica, he says proudly. From a ship that docked in Alexandria after escaping an Ottoman embargo. You glance down. The beans are whole, fragrant, clearly smuggled, and entirely illegal for him to possess. You smile. Charming, you say, and treasonous. Historians still argue whether the Ottomans truly had a monopoly on coffee exports in the 1500s. Whether the port of Mocha was a stranglehold or merely a bottleneck. What's undeniable, coffee was power, and Europe was hooked. Venice, Vienna, Paris, places that once called coffee the devil's drink, now practically prayed over their morning cups. You once heard a rumor that Pope Clement VIII tried coffee just to ban it, then declared it too good for infidels to have alone. You'd like to think that's true. The Ottomans exported roasted beans only, never raw, to keep others from growing their own. But of course, a few beans always slipped out. Smuggled by monks, bribed from dockhands, sewn into robes, or in one famous case, baked into a loaf of bread and carried to Europe by a mule. And with every bean that reached a European port, the empire's carefully brewed control began to foam over. You recall when the palace received its first reports of a coffee house in Venice. The Sultan scoffed. Let them drink it. They'll never understand it. He was wrong. Europeans not only drank it, they built temples to it. In Vienna, they sweetened it. In Paris, they added cream. And in London? Well, they just argued louder while holding it. You once attended a diplomatic banquet where the French ambassador tried to impress the court with his royal French roast. It was scorched, sour, and somehow both weak and too strong. You nodded politely, then served him the Sultan's house blend. He cried. Venetians, for their part, treated coffee like gold dust. They created bottegas, early cafes, where nobles mingled with merchants and chess pieces clicked beside sugar cubes. You once received an invitation, very discreto travel with a trade delegation to see a Venetian cafe firsthand. You accepted, disguised yourself as a spice consultant, took only a few tools, a folding spoon, a miniature chesve, and a pouch of Yemeni beans you swore you wouldn't. Trade but did for a small painting of a Turkish barista on a gondola. Venice was chaos, beautiful, fragrant chaos. The cafe was candlelit, crowded, and no one agreed on how to brew anything. They used filters, strainers, even a thing called a percolator, which looked like a teapot that had gotten into a fight and lost. But the people were alive, joking, shouting, falling in love mid-argument, and in every hand a cup. They'd taken your empire's quiet ritual and turned it into a public festival. And you loved it. You returned to Istanbul changed. Not disloyal, just curious. It wasn't just Venice. Vienna brewed coffee after the failed Ottoman siege in 1683. Legend says the retreating army left behind sacks of beans. The locals tried to boil them, choked, then added milk. Voila. A new empire of caffeine was born. Historians still debate if that story is true or just Austrian marketing. You think why not both? Even the arts drank deeply. In one opera, La Cantata del Café by Bach, the heroine refuses to marry unless her fiancé lets her keep drinking coffee. Now that's a woman with priorities. Europe didn't just adopt coffee, it romanticized it, exoticized it, painted portraits of veiled women sipping from Turkish cups while wearing outfits no Ottoman ever wore. You once saw a painting in a Viennese gallery titled The Sultan's Delight. It showed a man reclining in a feathered robe, drinking coffee served by a parrot. You didn't know whether to laugh or correct them. You chose laughter. Back in the present, the Venetian before you clears his throat. I was told, he says, that you guard the Sultan's blend, that you taste every cup. You raise a brow. You were told correctly. He leans closer. Would you sell the recipe? You blink, then burst out laughing. He looks offended. We'd pay handsomely. Still chuckling, you respond, and I would die poorly. Because the Sultan's private blend isn't written down. It exists only in your memory and in muscle. It has 17 steps. One involves heating water over rosewood coals. Another includes whispering a prayer to the cup before pouring. And even if someone did try to replicate it, they'd fail. Because it's not the ingredients. It's the intuition. You can taste when a bean was dried too fast, when the grinder was too hot, when someone added sugar to hide a mistake. You hand the Venetian back his smuggled beans. Keep these, you say, but leave the recipe. He nods, disappointed but wiser. As he walks away, you whisper to yourself, let them drink their opera coffee. And as the bells of the Hagia Sophia toll in the distance, you return to the palace, where the real blend awaits, where the cup is still sacred, and where you, tongue sharpened and eyes steady, continue the quiet work of a diplomat with a spoon. You are not asleep. You are simply lying very still in a position that might resemble rest, surrounded by tiny cups, jars of spices, and enough half-used sesame to supply a small army of baristas. The palace requested a tasting, not a tasting session. A tasting. No specifics, no context, just one of those vague orders that trickle down from the Sultan's court like a lazy avalanche of confusion and silk slippers. You sent back a question, how many brews? The answer, as many as necessary. That's not a number. That's a threat. You roll up your sleeves. The brazier is already lit, the coals glowing like quiet little demons, and your assistant, bless him, is fast asleep in the corner with a cinnamon stick in his hand. You don't wake him. This isn't a job for someone with a weak tongue or a working sense of self-preservation. Tonight, it's just you. You grind the first batch. Yeminim. Slightly smoky, aged in a cedar chest for 6 weeks. You roast it lightly, boil it low. Taste it. Good. Sharp start, smooth finish. Slight note of leather. That might just be your imagination. Or breakfast. You spit. Cleanse. Move on. Next, Abyssinian beans kissed with cardamom. Then a Syrian blend with hints of sage. Then a cursed experiment involving rose water and crushed pistachio that tastes like regret and soap. By cup 11, your hands are trembling. By cup 20, your eyebrows are sweating. By cup 30, you're hearing phantom pashas whispering compliments from behind the spice rack. You pause. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman palace tasters used opiates or stimulants to get through marathon tastings. You say tastings were stimulants. You take a bite of sweetbread to ground yourself, then return to the battlefield. The next batch is Persian, rich, overly romantic. You whisper, we get it, you write poetry, and move on. Cup 35 flavored with orange zest. Not bad. Cup 36, a gift from a court musician who claims coffee helps him hit higher notes. It tastes like wood varnish. You feel your pulse in your teeth. You take a break, walk a slow lap around your chamber. The floor tilts slightly. Or you do. You breathe. Return. Cup 40. You lose count. Then regain it. Then lose it again. You switch from spitting to sipping carefully. Your tongue has staged a rebellion. Your stomach threatens to secede. You keep going, because there's no stopping once you start. Not in this palace. Not in your position. The silence of the tasting room is different now. It hums. Like the walls themselves are vibrating in caffeine sympathy. The next brew is infused with musk. You almost slap yourself. You begin talking to the Sesvies, apologizing when one boils over, congratulating another on stellar foam discipline. Cup 49 is spiced with cloves and ground myrrh. You blink slowly and say, "This one tastes like Tuesday." No one responds. Cup 50. You sit. You stare. This is the final brew. You decide it is. Because if there's another cup after this, you'll start chewing on the carpet. You prepare it slowly, methodically. Your movements are dreamlike, almost sacred. The beans are from a new shipment, unmarked. Their origin unclear. Their scent unfamiliar. Their potential unknown. You grind them gently. Roast them with patience. Brew them over a coal that seems, somehow, to flicker just for you. You pour. The foam settles perfectly. A small tan crescent moon floats on top. You lift the cup. You sip. And everything stops. Not in a bad way. Not in a poisoned way. Just a pause. The flavor is unlike anything else from the night. Balanced. Earthy. A hint of something like fig leaf, maybe smoke, maybe sadness. It tastes like completion. You hold the cup in your lap and close your eyes. This is the one. You don't know where it came from. You just know it's the one that should go to the Sultan. You mark the pot, seal the sample, and stagger to your feet. You look at the tray. 49 other cups stare back at you like fallen soldiers. You bow to them, mutter an oath, and carry the final brew out into the dawn. The halls are quiet. No one else is awake yet. The world smells like sleep and wood smoke and maybe a little panic. You deliver the cup. The servant takes it without question. You watch him disappear into the chambers of power. You, meanwhile, return to your quarters. Collapse onto a cushion. Whisper to your assistant, "If I start speaking Portuguese, assume I've finally snapped." He nods, half awake, and goes back to snoring. You lie there, heart fluttering like a bird in a box, unsure if your pupils are still the same size. But one thing is certain. You've just tasted 50 cups of politics, poetry, and peril, and lived to steep another day. The spoon is missing. Not just a spoon, your spoon. The long-handled silver one with the mother-of-pearl inlay you use only for diplomatic blends. You don't panic. Not yet. But your fingers feel strangely naked as you sort through your tray. Everything else is in place: the sezve, the zarf, the spice pouch, even the emergency fig candy you pretend is for palate cleansing. Still, the spoon is gone. You glance at your assistant, who gives you the sleepy look of a man who has neither the answers nor the energy to fake them. You sigh. Later that day, a note appears under your door. It's wrapped around a stick of cinnamon and tied with black thread, a known sign of mischief in palace code. You unroll it. One sentence written in a hand that smells like clove oil. "The spoon is safe. Check the spice cabinet. Do hurry." You do. Because if someone has gotten into the spice cabinet, your cabinet, things are worse than you thought. The cabinet is locked. Or rather, was. Now it hangs slightly open, as if too guilty to shut all the way. Inside chaos. Saffron jars moved. Anise scattered. Your jar of powdered ginger replaced with something labeled ginger-esque. And behind it all, a folded scroll, stuffed in a hollowed-out cinnamon stick. Who hollows out cinnamon? You unroll the scroll. It's a map. Crude one, hand-drawn. Not of the palace. Of the Grand Bazaar. Specifically, a path from the apothecary's corridor to the old coffee district. The message is clear: someone wants a meeting, and they're not subtle. Historians still argue whether palace espionage ever reached the coffee chambers. Most scholars say no, but most scholars never had their tools tampered with and their cutlery kidnapped. You grab your coat. The bazaar is alive with sound and scent. Sellers shout, spices swirl in the air. Someone is frying dough over a flame that looks like it's plotting revolution. You follow the map. Past the silks, the jewelry, the man claiming to sell original Mongol armpit oil. You don't ask. Finally, you arrive at a stall that appears to be selling sugar. Just sugar. Cubes, granules, syrups, bottles stacked like a crystallized skyline. The vendor is too calm. He smiles too fast. His mustache is waxed with intent. You say nothing. He pushes a jar toward you. Something sweet for someone clever. You lift the lid. Inside is your spoon. Clean, then, untarnished. Nestled in powdered sugar like it's on vacation. You nod. Now why did you borrow it? The vendor shrugs. Not me. I was asked to hold it. Said it belonged to someone with a very sensitive tongue. You're about to leave when he adds, but since you're here, care to try something? He slides a cup across the counter. It's coffee, unmistakably brewed in the Turkish style, but with a twist in the scent, something spicy, a little minty, a whisper of heat. You sip. It's extraordinary. Complex, smooth, warming. You taste cardamom, cinnamon, mint, and something else, cayenne. You glance up. Who made this? The vendor smiles. A friend of the court, who's very interested in the next appointment for chief spice officer. You nearly choke. That's not a real job. Not yet, he says. But the vizier's cousin thinks it should be. You set the cup down. Espionage is one thing. Lobbying with coffee is another. Mixing the two, that's treason. Or Tuesday. You look around. The crowd flows past. No one seems to notice you. But someone does. You feel it. You leave the sugar stall, spoon in your pocket, senses sharpened. Back in the palace, you begin your investigation. You interview spice stewards. Cross-check jar weights. Taste test 4 varieties of ginger to find out who's been watering down your stock. You find your answer in the mace. Not the weapon. The spice. Derived from the covering of nutmeg, it's delicate, fragrant, and nearly impossible to fake. Yours tastes off. Your assistant finally breaks. Says someone offered him a coin to borrow your ingredients. He didn't ask questions. You don't punish him. You just say, next time, borrow from the vinegar cabinet. No one ever messes with vinegar. And now you know who's behind it. The vizier's cousin. Eager for a new court position, building support through flavor. You have to admire the creativity. Still, you prepare a response the only way you know how. The next day, you send a small box to the sugar stall. Inside, 1 carefully roasted coffee bean, dusted with cayenne, coated in sugar, dipped in vinegar. Attached is a note. Balance is everything. Think twice before sweetening the wrong mouths. A few days later, a new jar of ginger appears in your cabinet. Unopened. Genuine. And your spoon? Never missing again. You sit at your desk, stirring a fresh brew with the recovered silver. You smile. Because in this palace, information travels not in letters or ink, but in spice and heat. And today, you've won a battle. Not with swords, with cinnamon. It's early. The palace is hushed, as if holding its breath. You walk slowly through the tiled corridor that leads to your most closely guarded task. Today, you're not just making coffee. You're guarding a secret. One so valuable, it could shift the balance of palace power if it ever left your hands. The Sultan's private blend. You've heard rumors whispered in the bazaar. The secret coffee blend, they say, contains crushed emeralds. Or perhaps it's brewed over sandalwood. Maybe it's stirred only by virgins using moonlight. You chuckle every time you hear these stories. Because the real secret, it's you. You're the recipe. Oh, sure, there's a blend, a formula, a process so specific it would make an alchemist sweat. But no one's written it down. Not all of it, anyway. Because it exists in 2 parts. 1 part tattooed in tiny ink across your back, just along the left shoulder blade. Coded, hidden in a pattern of symbols that look like stars, but are really roasting ratios and temperature timings. And the other half? Carved's, actually carved into a polished piece of cedar wood embedded in a walking stick belonging to your rival. Yes, you have one. Chief tea steward. It's laughable, really. Tea in Istanbul? But he's patient. Smart. and ambitious in that slippery way that makes you wonder if his smile is brewed from something besides leaves. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman palace truly split secret knowledge among rivals to ensure loyalty. But you know this story is real. You live it. The Sultan decided long ago that no one man should have full control over his most sacred indulgence. So he split the knowledge. You get the beans, the timing, the technique. He gets the water temperature, the spice ratio, and the final rest period. Alone, neither of you can recreate the blend. Together, magic. If you hate each other, the secret stays buried. If you work together, the cup is divine. Either way, the Sultan wins. Diabolical and brilliant. Once a week, you meet in a sealed chamber, no windows, just candles and a guard outside who's not allowed to speak. You nod. Your rival nods. Neither of you speaks more than necessary. You each set up your tools like dueling surgeons. You hand over your ground beans. He hands over a tiny flask of pre-measured water infused with saffron, cinnamon, and something he refuses to name. He lights the coal. You boil. Silence. Steam. A thin trail of smoke curls between you. Then you stir 3 times clockwise, once counterclockwise. Always. He adjusts the flame, times it with his finger held above the sesvi like he's measuring ghosts. You pour. Slowly, evenly. No spills. That's the rule. The Sultan receives it in a black porcelain cup with no zarf. No distraction. Just the brew. He drinks alone. Then he either calls for another or waves you both away. It's rare he says a word. But last week he said something. Just one word. Perfect. And that's when the game changed. Because now your rival thinks he made it perfect. And you know you did. Which means the alliance is fraying. You've started checking your ingredients twice. You keep your tattoo covered unless you're bathing alone. You've added a sliver of cinnamon to every cup just to test if he notices. He hasn't, or he's pretending not to. You suspect he's been trying to recreate your half in secret. Last night, you caught a kitchen boy with a notebook scribbled full of symbols that looked suspiciously like your roast curve. The boy now washes ladles with his hands. You've tightened security. You even tested the walking stick. Waited until your rival left it propped against the wall, then gently rubbed the inlay with a clove oil cloth. The letters revealed themselves like old ink returning from the dead. You memorized 2 of them, enough to know he hasn't changed the recipe. Yet, but the danger is real. If anyone got both halves, if they managed to replicate the Sultan's blend without either of you, that would be a threat greater than any rebellion. Because coffee in this court isn't just refreshment. It's identity, ritual. The one moment the Sultan is unguarded. Whoever controls that blend controls more than taste. They control access. You finish preparing the next installment. Mark the beans with a tiny chalk line on the sack. The signal for safe. Tomorrow you meet again. You wonder if your rival will try something. You wonder if you should. You sit quietly with your own cup, not the blend, just a simple Yemen roast. Black. Honest. You stare at your hands. How steady they are. Still, after all these years, you remember when you first learned your half of the recipe. It was a midnight ceremony. A single candle. An old man whose breath smelled like licorice and vinegar whispered the ratios into your ear. Then he said, "This knowledge binds you. Abuse it and your tongue will betray you." You didn't believe him. But now, when you even think about writing it down, your hand trembles. So you don't. You trust your mind, your muscle memory, and the fact that your half is safer with you than with ink. You lie back on your cot, face turned toward the stars outside the small window. The ink on your back itches slightly. Somewhere in the palace, your rival probably does the same. 2 men, 1 blend, endless tension, and a recipe too powerful for either of you alone. They say betrayal never smells like danger. It smells like flowers. In your case, it smells like jasmine and honey. It begins with a smile, a strange one. The kind of smile that stretches too far or not quite enough. Delivered by a kitchen boy you've never seen before, who bows too deeply and announces, "Today's special delivery for your tasting pleasure." You narrow your eyes. A silver tray. A sealed scissor. No label, no name. He says it's from the Sultan's niece, someone whose coffee you've tasted only twice, both times with heavy clove and light flirtation. But she's not on the schedule. And her usual steward is a woman with one eye and the calm of a statue. Something's wrong. You uncork the scissor. The scent wafts up floral, sweet, almost sticky. Jasmine, honey, and something else. Almond? You know that scent. It's the scent of bitter almonds, which means one thing: cyanide. Historians still argue whether actual attempts were made to assassinate palace staff via coffee. You now have extremely caffeinated, twitching pigeons that would like a word with them. You thank the boy, tell him to wait, and take the tray to your corner tasting room. There you unleash the full force of your paranoia. You drop a bit onto the silver spoon. Watch for tarnish. Nothing. You test a trace with litmus paper soaked in goat milk. Slight color change. Maybe. You prepare a tiny cup. Add 2 drops of antidote extract. You sip. And that's when you feel it. Your mouth goes numb. Not the usual numbness of strong brew. A chemical numbness. Fast. Blooming. Your lips tingle. Your jaw stiffens. You spit, gag, reach under your table and bite into a sliver of raw detail trick you learned from a Persian ambassador who claimed it drew out poisons like confessions. It helps, but not enough. Your assistant finds you with your forehead on the cool stone floor, mumbling something about bees and justice. You wake in your bed 3 hours later with a faint ache behind your eyes and the deep, echoing realization you've been framed, and you know exactly who did it. Because the Sultan's niece. She's clever, yes, but she's not subtle. And this blend, too subtle for her. This was someone with access, with training, with motive. Your rival. You pace the floor, mind reeling. He's grown tired of the half and half control. You imagine it clearly. He makes a secret full blend using what he thinks he knows from your half. Tries to deliver it through a third party. If you survive, he blames the niece. If you die, he inherits the recipe by default. Or at least gets promoted to acting coffee authority, a title you hope never becomes real. But he made a mistake. Because jasmine, that's his signature scent, he uses it in tea like it's salt. And honey too much. A heavy hand trying to hide bitterness. You gather your tools. This time not for brewing, for revenge. You prepare a decoy batch of your half of the blend. Looks right, smells right. But the ratios, just wrong enough to ruin everything. You wrap it in velvet and have it accidentally delivered to your rival's chambers by a muttering steward who forgets to lock the pouch. Now you wait. Within hours, word spreads the Sultan has rejected a tasting. Called it sour and sullen. Perfect. Later that evening, you pay a visit. You walk into your rival's room without knocking. He's there, reading. Or pretending to. You nod at him. We need to talk. He smiles. About Jasmine? He's not even denying it. You sit. Slowly. If I had died, you'd have taken my post. Temporarily, he says, with the composure of a man who's practiced this line in the mirror. You both stare at each other for a moment. I used vinegar beans, you whisper. He goes pale. You smile. They'll never trust you again. He doesn't respond. He just sips a cold cup of tea and pretends not to swallow hard. And so the stalemate resets. You live. He sulks. And no one gets the full recipe. For now. But your trust is gone. You begin taking precautions. You move your sesve to a locked box. You replace your assistant. Twice. You taste nothing without your own hand at every stage. You have the tattoo on your back re-inked with a tiny adjustment to throw off copycats. You create a decoy set of notes and leave them in your desk. And just in case, you start working on a third half of the recipe. One only you will know. The part that lives in your senses. The way the foam curls when it's ready. The rhythm of the stir. The tilt of the flame. Uncopiable. You're not paranoid. You're prepared. Because now you know, this isn't about coffee anymore. It's about legacy. About the legend. About who history will remember, the man who brewed perfection or the one who tried to steal it. And you know which one you are? You pour yourself a fresh cup from your own blend. Tasted, trusted. You raise it slowly and toast the silence. The moon is high, but no one is sleeping. Not the guards pacing like cats along the outer walls. Not the chamberlains adjusting cushions that don't need adjusting. And certainly not you. Tonight is different. There's a strange hum in the air. Not the buzz of flies or gossip or even politics. It's the hum of fear. You feel it in the way the torches flicker against the stone, in the sudden silence of the musicians, in the whispered question making its way through every marble hall. Did someone poison the Sultan? You don't run. You walk quickly, calmly, carrying the tools of your trade like weapons, sesve in one hand, pouch of beans in the other, your fingers clenched so tightly around your spoon, it might become a permanent extension of your palm. You're not panicking. Not yet. Because this isn't the first time someone's accused the coffee. But it might be the last. You're ushered into the Sultan's chambers. The room smells wrong, too much rose water, too little reason. The air is thick. Curtains drawn. Lamps dimmed. On a couch lies the Sultan, pale and silent, his eyes barely open. His fingers twitch as though he's still tasting something that doesn't belong in his mouth. The court physician stands nearby, as useless as ever. He drank one cup, the physician mutters. Collapsed after 5 minutes. He's breathing. Barely. Everyone looks at you. Of course they do. You close your eyes. Breathe. Where's the cup, you ask? A eunuch brings it forward on a gold tray. The surface still glistens with a few sticky drops. You sniff. Stir. Taste with the edge of a spoon. Not your blend. Definitely not. Historians still argue whether royal illnesses were more often caused by poison or by overcooked lamb. But this is poison, not in the dramatic sense. Not the kind that foams the mouth or drops you mid-sentence. No, this is subtle. A stomach churner, a fever starter, a whispered death. Yeah, you can smell the ginger. But beneath it, licorice? No. Something darker. A chemical bitterness that bites from the back of the tongue. Belladonna, maybe. Nightshade? Not enough to kill. Enough to remind. This is a message. You turn to the gathered men. The Grand Vizier. 2 generals. A clerk trying to disappear into the curtain. I didn't make this, you say flatly. They nod. Some relieved. Some disappointed. The Vizier steps forward. We need another cup. Immediately. And you'll taste it here. You raise an eyebrow. You want me to serve coffee to a possibly poisoned sultan in the room? He doesn't blink. So you get to work. You set the coals. You choose the safest beans. You roast, grind, boil all while being watched by 7 suspicious men who wouldn't know a sesve from a chamber pot. You brew slowly, deliberately. Foam rises. Scent deepens. You pour. And then you sip. 101. 2. 3 times. Then you hand the cup to the Sultan. He doesn't drink it, at first, but slowly with great effort he lifts it. Sips. Waits. 10 seconds. 20. A breath. A longer breath. Then a word. A hoarse whisper. Better. The room exhales. You back away, your knees shaky, not from fear but from the weight of responsibility. You've just brewed the most important cup of your life. A few hours later, the physician reports that the Sultan's fever is breaking. The coffee helped. The Vizier gives you a nod that might be gratitude or relief or just plain exhaustion. You return to your quarters and collapse. But you don't sleep. Instead, you lay awake, thinking about who slipped the fake cup into the chamber. And why. It wasn't your rival. Too bold. He'd never get past security. No, this was someone inside. Someone closer. A eunuch, a concubine, a page boy bribed with figs and flattery? You don't know. Not yet, but you'll find out. Because now the palace is shaken. Everyone suspects everyone. Every cup is questioned, which means your job has just become sacred. You are no longer just the chief taster. You are the Sultan's shield. And in a world where ink lies and silk deceives, only the tongue knows truth. You set out to test every ingredient, every jar. You roast beans in batches and test them all with the pigeons. You taste 15 spoons of sugar and 3 suspicious cloves. You check the water. The spoons? The cups. You even clean your sesame twice. Then you call in your rival. He looks at you surprised. You think I did it? He asks. I think you could have, but I didn't. Then help me prove it. Together, for the first time without tension, you make a new cup. No poison, no messages, just balance. The Sultan drinks it the next morning. He smiles, and for a moment, just a flicker, he nods. At you. No one sees it, but you feel it. Later that night, alone in your chamber, you prepare one last cup. You drink it slowly with the window open. The breeze smells of water and stone and roses. You survived, and so did he. But the palace will never be the same, because now everyone knows. A poisoned cup once made it to the Sultan's lips, and only one man can keep that from happening again. You don't know it yet, but tonight's cup will be your last. Not because of poison, not because of exile, because of retirement. But let's not rush. The palace is unusually quiet tonight. A soft hush lies over the halls like a velvet shawl. You recognize it, the hush of something ending. You're in the tasting room, alone, just like you were at the beginning. The coals burn low, the copper gleams, and your fingers move without thinking. Measure, grind, stir, pour. Muscle memory, yes, but also something deeper. Devotion. Tonight's blend is simple. Nothing exotic. No roses. No mystery powders. Just Yemeni beans, a hint of cinnamon, and silence. The kind of cup you make when you're saying goodbye. You sip. Perfect. And then footsteps. The chamberlain enters, slow and quiet. In his hands a scroll, bound in green silk. You've seen this scroll once before. Years ago, when the taster before you vanished without ceremony. It's not a dismissal. It's an honor. Inside the scroll is your release, your freedom, and your reward. The Sultan has declared your service complete. Your name will be recorded in the house ledger under exceptional loyalty. You are no longer required to taste another drop in his name. And your response? You nod. Once. Then pour one more cup for yourself. The chamberlain bows, offers you a second scroll. This one is heavier. Inside a deed. A small house near the Bosphorus. A garden. A stipend. A servant. And of course, a monthly ration of the Sultan's finest beans. You laugh a little too hard at that last part. Historians still debate whether royal tasters truly ever retired. Most assume they simply disappeared. But not you. You pack your tools carefully. The sesvi wrapped in linen. The silver spoon kissed once, then sealed in its box. The spice jars cleaned. One of them ginger left behind, half full. A gift for the next taster. Or a warning. You don't say goodbye to your rival, but you leave him a note. The blend isn't complete without balance. Remember that. You don't say goodbye to the Sultan, but you leave behind a final batch, labeled simply legacy. The journey to your new home is quiet. The boat moves slowly through the water. Seagulls cry overhead. The wind tastes like salt in beginnings. Your house is modest. Stone walls, a small stove, a garden already rich with herbs, and a fig tree. There's even a curious cat who seems to think the place belongs to him. You unpack. You rest. You breathe. And you begin to remember all the years of ceremony, of near death, of perfection and paranoia, of politics and pigeons, and all the cups. You realize you probably tasted over 14,000 in your time. Some were glorious, others terrifying. A few you still dream about. You take your favorite seesve from the box, set it gently on the new stove. Just once, just to see. And that's when a knock comes. A boy, barely 16, nervous, holding a tiny, clumsily wrapped pouch of beans. My uncle said you might teach me, he mumbles. You raise an eyebrow. Teach you what? He fumbles. How to know if the foam is real. You stare at him, then smile. Invite him in. Because maybe the story doesn't end here. Maybe it never really ends. It just gets passed on, cup by cup, sip by sip. And as the sun rises over the water, you pour 2 cups. One for him, one for you. Perfectly balanced, as all good endings should be. And now, as we let the fire in that last sesvi burn down low, let's return to the quiet. Let the flickering torches fade. Let the stone walls of the palace dissolve into a memory, the kind that smells like spice and steam and softly toasted beans. You've walked through chambers filled with whispers and power. You've tasted danger, diplomacy, and even a hint of rebellion, all inside the curl of steam rising from a simple cup. But now the tray is set down, the final cup sipped, the tools packed away, and the air no longer hums with risk, it rests. Because even legends sleep. The chief coffee taster's story may be complete, but its aroma lingers. Out there, someone stirs a spoon with too much sugar. Someone adds a little clove without knowing why. Someone sips, smiles, and says, "There's something about this." And they're right. They're tasting a story, a history, a tradition that didn't end with the last cup, it simply became part of the next one. So as your eyes grow heavy and your breathing slows, let the palace fade. Let the city lights flicker into stars. Let the scent of coffee drift gently through your dreams. You're safe now. The coffee is perfect, and morning is still a long, long way away. Good night.